I haven't been making as many talks recently because of whatever spare time I've got. I've kind of having to do things, protecting our scheduled monument, and then there's like all of the arrests for the protesters have been trying to help sort out, and I've been trying to get some more learning and reading done and more books bought for privileges. So I haven't been doing as many video talks, and there's no one's listening to them, and I'm not happy with the way that the whole country's going with the whole social media. Everyone's sort of like becoming mini celebrities now and getting I never thought that celebrities were a good idea in the first place or invention ever. I've never thought mainstream TV as being good for society at all. And now there's just people who they're perfectly bold and confident and sociable, but they're wrong, or they don't know what they're talking about, or they're not concentrating on things that are important, and they're getting distracted in their own stuff and opinion. And what's happening now is opinion is taking over fact and truth and law and things that are actually really important. Things, to actually when there were things being done severely wrong. And I think that's quite chaotic because you're getting all these emergence of these personalities now. It's sociopathy. And it's definitely sociopathy because when people get popular and they get a lot of viewers and fans and so forth, there's a capacity they've got. You've only really got the capacity to give your own time and attention to respond two-way to people with a proper friendship to a capacity, right? Otherwise, beyond that, it's just you talking and them listening to you, right? So it's all beyond the capacity of people that you can truly engage with both ways. Once it exceeds that capacity, the rest is just people listening to you, and you're never really going to know who they are and talk to them, right? Because there's just too many people. I mean, unless you're walking around like Michael Jackson, swarms of, kids swarming around you, right? If you can remember every single one of them's name, then, then you're doing well. But, so, and when you get famous, like, you got Neil Oliver or Russell Brand or Dr. John Campbell, even people on your own side and who have similar views as you, right? They like to have people on their channel who also are popular and they can help their own channel get better and get more popular. I'm not saying they don't have people on who are lesser known, but it tends to be like, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And you're getting these sociopathology networks, but you've got obviously teams, you've got people who are sort of like tending towards, one side or the other side. You got people who are sort of like, environmentalists, or people who are technocrats, or people who are wanting to be traditionalist and conserve and protect. And then you got the people who are for all these new, ridiculous liberties beyond sense, like just, design a human or whatever at a whim. And I do not think that it's going in the way of healthy relationships. I think that these radio presenters, commercial radio presenters, and BBC presenters, they've always been sociopaths. It attracts those type of people, sociopathic people, right? And the sales pitch is that, hey, this is normal, right? This is completely and totally normal. This is, and we'll be really cool to everyone who comes on, and we'll smile, and like Simon Cowell smiles, and be nice to everyone, but it's a front, and that's not real life. And I think the thing why TV and the mainstream are suffering is because some aspects of real life now are coming through, which they try to prevent coming through on the main TV and so forth, unless they're doing some kind of drama or documentary, but definitely not when they want everything to go there, how the show, how they want it to go, all the things that get edited or cut out. And I think that it definitely, it can't be good where people are just wanting everyone to listen to them all the time. Because when you balance it out right, it's like you can't possibly respond or give attention to every single other person individually. Now, if they're fine about that, if this person, I'll give my time to them, I'll watch them and I'll listen to them, that's fine. But it's definitely not. It's not a balanced relationship, and I think that I don't think that it is creating healthy community and relationships like we used to have. It's going into this kind of like. I think that we'll probably might end up kind of like they did with all the businesses, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. They've accumulated all this money really quickly. Like Mark Zuckerberg has accumulated loads of money, and Sergey Brin and tech, and they've got more money than anyone could ever want or need. And they're doing it on all these fantasy projects, space projects, science projects, biology projects, all this mad stuff, like, all the things that you used to dream about, when you're growing up, all the projects that you could think you could do. Well, they're actually doing it, right? But the disproportion of the gap between them and the average person is just so ridiculous that it's just too much. And I think that we're at that stage now with sociology, and I don't know why some of these particular women as well, and men, mainly I guess sports people and people like that, I guess that's just who they are and what they are, and if there's not some kind of control put on it, they'll just, be like Jeff Bezos, but in sociology, right? Look at Joe Rogan, but it's all mainly created through being made possible through these new social platform media, and it's all numbers and statistics, and actually it's a strategic way to get the West into social points without calling it social points, right? And that's what they're doing to China. They're doing. It's part of the jigsaw puzzle. The China thing is like getting the masses to be obedient on the streets and crossing the road and behaving in public. That part of it. But the West, they've not dropped that on us yet. But they're just like Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, and they're trying to they're trying to get into these, C40 cities and so forth, 15-minute cities and all that, kind of like what they've been doing with China. But we're resisting it, but they need to get some kind of order in there. And I think that this kind of like social hierarchy, let's call it, for people who step up to it, it's all figured into this, facial recognition and the government can just, check up on any fact, detail thing, what did you post in the last, 6 weeks, every single bit of information, and then they take Royal Mail offers, and then they put the prices through the roof, and then, things are going missing, so, what do they have to do? It has to be tracked now, and then it won't go missing, but we'll have to pay a lot of money for it. I think that there could have been organisation and management in place with Royal Mail where things just wouldn't go missing from the start, but now that's not profitable. If nothing went missing now, right, you wouldn't need the tracking and they wouldn't need to put the prices up, but they want to do that or else they're not going to make money out of it. And then it's just part of the whole structure of this new, just to know everything, every single thing that every single person is doing. And they would like to be able to, know every single thing that everyone's thinking as well. It's just all clearly, it is a strategy. There's a strategy behind it. Now, that was like a 9-minute introduction, right? What do I think about these kids voting, 16, 17-year-olds voting? I didn't really think much about voting when I was at school. After I left school is probably around the time they introduced this kind of like, kids in parliament. You can have someone elected to do the children's parliament. I missed that. I think it was like a few years after I left school. So we never had that opportunity. The thing about school is this, and I think this is important, right? different children, when they're growing up and, you know, going through sort of puberty and maturing, have got slightly different rates of growth. And then obviously different kids have different attention spans, and you've got some autistic kids and you've got various other different kids, right? Some kids can focus very easily on things that are immediately in front of them, like books or instruments, and they can zone in on them, and they've got very good memory, and they can like focus on the information, right? And like learn to play guitar really quick and or something like that, right? And then they just get it. And, you know, read books and magazines and learn facts. And other kids have got different types of skills and thinking, like maybe more spatial awareness or things like that, right? What I found when I was growing up, I definitely wasn't someone who had an amazing memory, and it was very, very, very difficult to learn to play guitar, to remember all the notes, right? So I definitely wasn't a person who could sort of like focus in on something in front of me, because I was too busy thinking of all the things around me, right? Which is kind of like more of a spatial awareness type of thinking, which is actually, when you get older, better for politics, because then you're more aware of lots of different things that are going on all around and how it all fits together into one thing, even if you're not the greatest expert in this or that, or, you know, professor in, neurophysics or whatever it is, right? It's a different skill, but still, what I think is, as kids, as you're a small child, you're more in your own little world, you know, like in your house with your parents. And even if you go out into the garden, there's a lot to explore there, right? You know, or if you've got a garden, you know, if you vote Labour and you don't have a garden, then, you know, obviously not. But you can go to the park still, or a lot of people go to the park or wherever, right? And I'm absolutely certain that this generally applies for most children, that your mind, your actual brain hasn't grown enough to actually hold the information in it, and the awareness has not expanded, right, to contain all of the world and the information. So almost kind of like, you know, when you look at like a mirrored ball, you know, like a mirrored ball, like a brass bed knob or something like that, right? It reflects the whole world in it. It's kind of like it's all the surroundings from all around 360 degrees, the whole way around it, are on the surface of the object, right? You know, it contains its entire surroundings are reflected on the surface. Now, I'm not saying that children don't know what's going around them, but it's like, you know, when you remember back to a childhood and you remember a TV program and you think it's a certain way, when you later on in life, when you watch it again, you know, like 30, 40 years later, it usually is different to how you thought that you remembered it, or what you thought you saw or watched when you were a kid. It's never usually exactly the same, because you usually remember or were paying attention to different parts of it, right? It's like jokes as well, you know. As you get older, you know, it clicks and you get more of the joke, because you learn more and you know more meanings for more words, and there are more things like that, right? So there's more and more information in it. Now, this is the thing. Politics are about the running of the country and the whole of the country, right? And how the whole country works, but also you're not just voting for yourself, you're voting for, you know, what affects other people as well, right? Nothing's to say that you can't just vote for yourself, you know, if you don't care about anyone else and you say, right, you know, I think that we should ban this or ban that, so I'm voting for this party and I don't care about anything else. But politics is always meant, the idea of it, the concept of politics is meant to be, this is before anyone even got the vote, you know, it was the bishops, right? You know, they called the bishops to Parliament, right? And then they also called the barons and lords, but they were for other meetings to do with, owning the land and taking over the country. But it was mainly meant to be the religious leaders because they were in charge of the congregations and groups of people, according to William Prynne, right? And then they started to encompass all the religious leaders and the lords, but the lords were actually just called knights. But then you've got barons and knights, two separate terms. But it was the knights, but knights who are also landowners, right? The barons are basically high-ranking knights who owned lots of lands, as opposed to knights who were fighting but did not necessarily own loads of lands, right? So, and then it grows to encompass more. And then you had, obviously when the common people argued that they wanted, to representatives, then, but these people were all certain prestigious or esteemed people. Now, over time, from, like the early 1800s, when the Luddites went mad and smashed up, everything because, they invented factories and mills and then they were getting loads of money in and then they wanted the lower minimum wage to be raised, but they wouldn't do it even though they got a lot of petition signatures. You see, like we were taught about that at school, but no one told us about the petitioning aspect of it or the wage aspect of it. It was painted and portrayed like these are really nasty bad people who went mad and were against progress, right? No, these were people who the mill owners, right? Started building massive factories and getting industrial size operations going to build en masse, and they kept all the money for themselves because they were greedy and they wouldn't share it with everyone else, right? That's why they kicked off, and the government wouldn't make a law so everyone would be equal. They wanted to have rich people and poor people. That's why they smashed everything up, right? They weren't against progress. It's always to do with how are you going to use the technology, not necessarily whether there should or shouldn't be it. Like now with AI and stuff like that, arguments. And a lot of these things they've just done to us anyway before people kind of realise what was going on. So, anyway, back to the kids. So, should kids vote? Well, it depends because, firstly, you need to decide what politics is for. If those kids vote just because they want better school meals or they want to vote because education should be this way or that way, that's a valid reason why they should be able to vote, right? Kids, if there was going to be a reason why kids should vote, it should be because they should have a say in how the schools are run, right? Okay, because they go to school. Or maybe they think that cinemas should be illegal, or maybe they think that everyone should have a cinema in the garden. God knows what they want, right? But whatever they want. But the problem with kids is, this is the thing, right? Growing up and becoming a teenager and child, you're impressionable, right? Because you're impressionable to language, you're learning new words, and you're learning to speak, you're learning to walk, and then you're impressionable for all the television programs. I want the Thundercats toys, I want the He-Man toys, they're putting it, and you're soaking all this in, right? And that's what you want. You want what's cool, right? And then when you get to a teenager and you're grown up, the culture of like college students and the teenage life is a very socially affected thing. You copy trends, you're like, Extinction Rebellion look cool, right? Claire Farrell's got the the Big Bird hairdo or whatever, right? And it's like, that's cool. Or you might see like, disco, you might Scooby-Doo, I want to be groovy, right? And you might want to wear hippie clothes, or you might want to be a heavy metal thing. So you get into things, right? You get into them because it's cool. And it's this thing about being cool and trendy, and you do it because your peers do it or because you get into it. Now, the thing is, they're selling this to you all the time. It's like a sales pitch. And the problem is that then, you see, because you are at an influential age where you're getting influenced by all these companies who are using psychology on you, right? You're susceptible to that. So and when you're getting these political parties like Labour and Conservative, Labour are doing terrible. They're being absolutely slaughtered, right? And they called off the elections because of it, right? Because they didn't want to lose. Now, isn't it astounding now that, we're going to let kids vote? Now, they used Tracy Brabin because she was a Coronation Street celebrity, right? A Coronation Street star. And she won because all the women voted for her because they like Coronation Street and it's Tracy Brabin. And it's funny, right? Hey, this is funny. It's like Tracy Brabin, working class, and let's go to the polling station and let's bray it. Let's get the voting tickets and let's throw them in there. Literally, we'll bray it. We'll batter it. We'll beat it with our women's vote, with our working class women's vote. We'll bray the fucking ballot box. That's the ideology behind it, right? Tracy Brabin, we'll bray it, we'll batter it, we'll win, right? And they use YouTube to do it. When I found that all the platforms aren't licensed and they're abroad, and if you wanted to investigate them with an election petition, you'd have a hard time finding out, where the servers are. How do you know it wasn't duplicated or copied? And it's not scheduled. What if someone hacked it and made it show more times than they say that it was shown? You just don't know. It's not licensed. So this is the thing. And in a very similar way to how Tracy Brabin won because she was a Coronation Street star and she'd already got the popularity and celebrityism, and it got all the women to vote for her, right? For the mayor. They're going to do that with the kids, and that's what the plan was with Starmer, because, and therefore, I don't think at that age, because kids are more compelled with what's cool and what the other kids are doing, because they're doing it, or because they like the style of it, I don't think that at that age, their brain has quite grown and their attention is on the whole country and world, mainly because I don't think that your brain can encompass it because it's not fully grown yet, and you can't fully contain it and have the attention of all the things that are going on. And particularly at those ages, you've got these other attentions pulling you to do hormone-influenced attentions, right? And you're dealing with the hormones, and you're dealing with learning all these, male and, there's women around, or, there's other confrontational men in sports, and, you've got all these hormonal changes that you're focusing on, right? And I think politics, you could say, well, we need some of these opinions in politics. What are the opinions of these kids when they're going through these phases and things? But the thing is that when you're older, and when you're growing up, you are in a position to think about those things because you went through them, right? And you learned them, and you were young, but now you're not. So you learned that, and you know it. And it's about intellectual capacity. And I don't think that the kid, I think there are so many other things drawing the attention. You tend to be more concerned about what's happening to your country and to the people and how things should be run. Usually when it's under threat and it's getting changed, which usually tends to be, because that you weren't paying attention on it. And I think that's the reason. Because you're too busy playing sports, because you're too busy, going to the cinema or going on holiday or hanging around with friends or going to discos or going out drinking or whatever it is, you weren't paying attention to what the council were up to, and you weren't, noticing that, they sneaked this building away, or they took that away, or they took the park away that you used to go to when you grew up because you haven't been there for a while because you've been going out with your friends and all these things. Now you might say, well, okay, well, if kids could vote, then they would protect those things, but you never really realise that it's gone until it's too late. And, and I don't, it's like, I think by the time you get older, it's kind of like, it's too late and no one bothered about it. But I think that older people do actually tend to be more protective and conservative of things. But the thing is that these big corporate entities are the ones who have kind of been taking things away from us and doing all these plans and cheating us out of protecting it. Not the masses, not the people. It's not the actual voters, the general public. Because the general public always come together in communities and groups and object, but they never win. Well, they don't seem to win when one of these big corporate entities really wants to beat them, because they're relentless and they don't stop. And the system hasn't been doing what the people want. It hasn't been doing what the people want for a long time, I don't think, at all, and regardless of age. In fact, you could say, well, it was only, before the 1900s, all kids didn't go to school and they didn't have to have a compulsory education, and you had things like apprenticeships and things like that. So that was one thing they introduced at one point, apprenticeships, learning everyone should go to school and learn to read and things like that. But you see, this is the thing. And you see people go to university and get a degree, and then they get a profession like a GP or a scientist or a doctor, and they went for 3 years, they got a degree or whatever. And I actually think that interest in the whole country and care, real passionate care about what's happening with the country is actually age related. It's an age related thing, because you become more interested and aware of what's going on as your brain gets older, and then can encompass it all and isn't distracted by the hormones and the growing up social aspects and things like that. If you can get away from this mainstream thing that's feeding us constant tosh all the time, right, on nonsense. So I don't think that it's necessarily a good move, because I think that Labour desperately need this now, because they're finished. And it's like a last, if we can get, if we can somehow get these kids to vote Labour, because, it's they're all working class and it's cool and we can rebrand Labour, or are we going to use, Reform and Nigel Farage as a new party to try and win them over? It's still going to be game related, and now there's no doubt about it, with them, procuring Starmer, with the Tracy Brabin model, and with all of that army of celebs and that, it's going to be a media war, and they're going to try and win all the kids over with sneaky political material, which is mixed into all of the music videos, radio, commercial radio, packets of crisps, all these things, they're going to go full arsenal on, because that's what Nigel Farage is all about. This is his type of politics, right? Win them over by any means possible, no holds barred, right? Fuck the rules. The rule book's gone, right? Nick Clegg got the rule book, right? And he burned it. He set it on fire. He might as well have been Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock, right? He went on the radio. He cheated. No one was intelligent enough to afford to challenge him. That's kids for you. All Sheffield, it's a big student area, right? They've got university students. They're not all young students, right? Clegg won. Were any of them intelligent enough to challenge him in an election petition and say, just a minute, Nick, have you claimed that radio show publicity in your election campaign, or are you just getting it for free? This is the thing. Have you put it down on implied spending? They're not clued in on what's going on. So you're going to get more of that, even worse now with, all this YouTube, Facebook, and the rest of it, and on the kids. It's going to be 10 times worse. So they've scrapped the rule book. They're like, fuck the rules. We're not having no rules in voting. It's no holds barred, right? It's like, we don't need any spending rules now, because everyone's got a free camera, free phone. So who's going to control who's popular? It's the numbers, and this is when you get into this social point system, hierarchy. First, you've got to have the balls to stand up and not be bothered about being on there. Then you got to want everyone to worship you like, you're some sort of fucking guru. And, if you subscribe to that, you subscribe to the fact that, like, all these people are going to love me and worship me. I ain't got fucking time to speak to half of them, and frankly, I ain't going to try. So it has to be, you love me, I don't love you, because I can say, Russell Brand could say, oh, yeah, I love all my fans, right? Well, show me, like, shake all their hands, if you can shake every single fucking fan's hand, right, in 10 seconds, in an hour, then you love them. Well, I symbolically love them. I give, they receive. Like, I'm telling them, I'm sending out the vibes. I love you all. Right, okay then. You don't really want to meet me in person. You don't really want me to reply to you personally, but, I love you anyway. Well, what is love, though? What is love? It's unconditional. Do they love me unconditionally? They don't need me to give them any time. They give me, it's like it's all about me. It's all about me. But I am the saviour of children. I'm Russell Brand. They can all love me. I can't possibly love them. It's unconditional. They don't need me to really want to give them my time. I ain't gonna fucking meet them all in a park on a Wednesday at 6:00. This is the thing. So it can't possibly be anything that you could conceivably classify as a real relationship or friendship. It's fake, and I think that if this happens with the kids in voting, it's going to be like, I just do not think that at that time, growing up, you've got more important things that you're learning and focusing on, right? If it wasn't the case, then I'm pretty sure that, kids would have voted from the start. Why wouldn't they? There's a reason for it. There's a reason for children not voting, because they haven't learned enough yet. It's been an informed, responsible decision, I don't necessarily think that giving the women the vote was a great idea myself, and of the reason, because the women complained about the vote for so long, and then when they got it, they only vote for two parties. They're like, oh, we vote, all the poor women vote for Labour and all the rich women vote for Conservative. What was the point? They literally, you might, like I've said this before, it's like, it's either it's like five-a-side football or a full team, but it's the same, right? You have five-a-side or you're in an arena full, but the votes end up getting split the same. So it's like pretend. It's kind of like, we'll have, two people voting for Labour and two people for Conservative, or we can have, a million people voting for Labour and a million for Conservative. Oh, look, it's the same split, it's the same division, right? So it was a con. I think it was a con to give women the vote. It's not like, all the women, split vote between Labour, Conservative, Lib Dems or whatever, or loads of different independent people, and then they use the con and the lie that, we couldn't possibly have a government with independent people because they won't be able to form a government. Well, why not? Because no one agrees with anything. Well, that's the whole point in politics, isn't it? You're supposed to debate it and argue it and come to an agreement, because if it's almost kind of like the entire government, every single MP is Labour, right? If every single MP was Labour, right, and then they went into the government, then the whole Labour manifesto, no one contests anything in it at all whatsoever. So it's kind of like, why turn up to debate? Oh, well, there are one or two agreements. Oh, you can't have disagreement. You can't have disagreements within the Labour Party. Or Keir Starmer will say you'll never stand for the party again. Well, there's only one party, All the other parties have shut down. There is only Labour, but you'll never stand for it again because you didn't vote how we wanted in the chamber. Well, just put my vote down for whatever you want, and then I'll have the rest of the week off, Just tick the boxes, right? Get voted in, tick the manifesto. What's the point in having debates? You see, this is the thing with Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer, I think, wants a government where right? Sign up at the door. Everyone signs a big petition, which is the Labour manifesto. Keir Starmer goes, thank you very much. And then he says, you can clock out and fuck off. You can go home, that for the next 6 years. I'll just get on with I'll just put all this stuff through now. Oh, we don't have to argue and debate anymore. No. You've just agreed to it all. Subscribe, sign below. Done. Right? Let's let the executives of the government get on with it. We'll just put it all through. Why have a debate? You don't have a debate because you don't agree with them on something. But yeah, Keir Starmer says if you don't agree with him, right, then you won't stand for his party again. So what kind of fucking debate is that? It's just ridiculous. We should ban political parties, but are they going to be going for the whoever's the most popular on YouTube or whatever? But that's the thing; it would be illegal because it would mean that you're voting for them because of popularity by how many followers or votes they've got or whatever, which has been given not through a campaign advert, an election campaign. So maybe the kids, I've been thinking, my opinion at the moment is, I'm like, why are we, should you be able to choose where your tax money goes, right? If you're not happy with the police or the Crown Prosecution Service, like if they hang up on you all the time when you ring them and they won't speak to you, you're like, well, why am I funding this organisation? It's like, you should penalise them. You should say, I don't want any of my tax money going to the CPS. They're misbehaving, right? They should have points, like social points. If the Crown Prosecution Service hang up on you and will not speak to you, refuse to, right? They're being crap, right? They're being slack, and they shouldn't get any money. They should suffer. They should have a reduction in the amount of public funds which goes to them. In fact, we should have live performance voting. Have the police been, the last 4 or 5, 6 times you reported something to the police, where they just completely, they said, fuck off, we're not doing anything about it. Right, fuck you then, I'm not giving you any money. And then you give them a social score, and you're like, I don't want any of my money going to that department, right? So when the public aren't happy with how the police are performing, then their funding drops, right? And then you don't have Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves arguing it out in Parliament. We're going to, take the old people's fuel allowance away or whatever, right? Are they doing this in China? Notice, right, that in China it's all about the behaviour and conduct of the citizens. Oh, you didn't look left and right when you crossed the road. Now you're not allowed to go out for 6 weeks or whatever, right? I mean, why us, right? Why don't we have such points for MPs and government departments, like live voting, and then if they're not performing, they get their funds cut automatically, right? Because people press a buzzer or something like on Graham Norton, and Jim Harris' seat falls back and he gets ejected, and a new permanent secretary has to be elected or voted in or whatever. This is the thing, maybe we should be voting for these permanent secretaries as well. But anyway, trying to get back to the kids and children and voting, I don't know, maybe they should have a vote for how the schools run, but then again, David Cameron didn't want prisoners to have any votes on how the prisons should be run, If prisoners can't have a vote in this country on how the prisons should be run, then, maybe kids shouldn't be able to vote for how the schools run. I personally, 1 or 2 kids are interested in politics, right? But only so much as, some kids are interested in, opera or classical music, right? You're going to get those kind of bookworm kids or whatever who like politics, but I still don't, even though they might like it and they might, have all the, political party broadcasts from Labour or whatever, or, almost like some kind of Dwayne Dibley character, some kind of collector collecting, he's got every single political broadcast from the Labour Party for the 50. He doesn't collect, like movies. There's some kid instead of all the Father Ted collection box set, he's got like, the full Labour Party debates or something like that. You're going to get kids like that, but they're not all like that. And even if I think that those kids who kind of like, oh, I like politics at an early age, they might know all the MPs and they might necessarily, remember some policies, and they might even know about some procedures in the House of Commons. I still don't think that if they do, they get the full big picture of it and really what is happening with the country or why we should need to do this or that. So it's purely down to the basis of, they might not give a damn about what's happening to the big picture of the whole country, but do they have the right to vote on because of, they want the school dinners changing or something like that? Well, I would say that, why aren't the schools letting them all